Avengers! I'm Erik Voss, and you better watch this breakdown or I'll break your knees! This is a breakdown of Daredevil episode 5 and 6. Disney Plus dropped both episodes on March 25th, and we are merging these analyses into one big St. Patty's Day heist / Muse Bloodfest video for you, with all the Easter eggs and details you missed across these two episodes. Episode 5 is titled With Interest, which is, of course, a play on words pertaining to the interest gained on a bank account, as this episode is a bank heist. Let's go! Episode 5 opens with the song The Rocky Road to Dublin by the Young Dubliners, actually a 1994 cover of an old 19th century folk song with words from the Irish poet D.K. Gavin. And if I mispronounce Gavin or Gavin or whatever it is, I'm supremely sorry. But the lyrics tell an awesomely hilarious story about an Irishman making his way across Ireland and Wales and England, a journey initially off to reap the corn, which could mean any crop or just to make some money, and often being mocked by locals for his Irish accent and getting into fights. It's just the kind of song that these Irish members of the Five Families would blare in their car on their way to steal a valuable gold-colored gem. We see various shots of St. Patrick's Day festivities around New York City. Why St. Patrick's Day is the day of a heist? Well, why not? We saw in The Fugitive how useful a St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago was when it came to blending in and escaping authorities. It's just a massive day of partying and revelry, and the police would be stretched thin or themselves pretty drunk. But Irish-American Matthew Murdock isn't partying. After promising Kirsten McDuffie that he'd get more funding for their law firm, he now sits in New York Mutual Bank seeking a loan. He twiddles his broken Daredevil horn as if waiting for this horn to give him permission to break someone's knee, which he will in this episode. He uses his Daredevil hearing to detect voices around the bank. One woman saying she and her newlywed husband just got back from City Hall and are now opening a joint checking account. This couple will come back later in the episode, and I assume based on that it wasn't a prenup between these two. Also, getting a marriage license at 9 a.m. on St. Patrick's Day? Interesting timing for that. Also, I don't think you need to be married to have a joint checking account. I don't know, maybe you do. This is the MCU. It's after the blip. They have all kinds of crazy laws, and I don't want to be overly presumptuous. Also, the second woman he hears is this short-haired woman in pink and purple.
Come on, it's St. Patrick's Day. What do you mean you don't want to come out for drinks with us?
So this is Selene, played by Annie Haig, whom we'll later learn is the inside woman who's in on this heist with Devlin. I assume she's here early to case the bank lobby to signal to her partner in crime. Matt also hears Johnny Santini talking to the guard about the Rangers game. Johnny, played by New York actor Jimmy Palumbo, comes back in episode 6 as a New York sanitation worker who washes off the Muse mural and realizes it's in blood. Matt's here to meet the bank manager, Mr. Aldridge, but instead meets Yusuf Khan, father to Kamala Khan. Mohan Kapoor coming back from Ms Marvel and the Marvels. Kamala's dad works at a bank both in the Ms Marvel comics and in the MCU, because remember in the Marvels, Yusuf was overheard giving Dag some financial advice.
That's why you want to invest in index funds rather than in individual stocks. Of course, both a Roth IRA and 401k are important for tax purposes.
On Yusuf's desk is a ton of adorable do-it-for-her style reminders of his daughter. We see a Funko figurine. This is a real-life Ms Marvel diamond glitter Funko. There's a framed photo of Yusuf with his wife Muniba, their daughter Kamala, and their son Amir. There's a pink paper with one of Kamala's drawings of herself that would have come from her bedroom walls. And then there's this mug that reads "World's Okayest Dad," probably a gag gift from Kamala. There's also the bowl of the butterscotch candies that come up at the end of the episode. And then there's this book of writings from Rumi, who was a 13th century Persian poet, Islamic scholar, Maturidi theologian, and Sufi mystic. And this might be the most important Easter egg of the episode, because Rumi was the poet from whom the inscription on Kamala's bangle was derived. What you seek is seeking you. That bangle, we now know after the Marvels film, is one of the 2 quantum bands that can be used to tear holes in reality and cross over into a new universe. Part of the fun of traveling is sharing what you're up to with everybody back home. But if you're paying through the nose for international roaming or spending half of your trip looking for free Wi-Fi, you're doing it wrong. Now that eSIM is in, Airalo is the easiest way to stay connected no matter where you are. Airalo is an easy-to-use app that offers you a fully digital solution to staying connected abroad. That means less wasted packaging for the planet, and you don't have to find a SIM card kiosk the second you land. With Airalo, you just log in, pick an eSIM plan for wherever you're traveling, and it'll activate automatically when you arrive. And make sure you check out my code NewRockstars3 for a sweet $3 off your first eSIM. Airalo works in over 200 countries and regions and has plans that work for data, voice calls, SMS, whatever you need to stay stay connected. One of our staffers, for instance, just went to Edinburgh. They picked out a plan and were able to stay connected the whole time they were there. No crazy roaming fees included. Over 20 million people use Airlo when they travel, which is probably why it's the leading eSIM store on the market. Install Airlo today so that you can stay connected whenever you travel, and use my code Rockstars3 to get $3 USD off your first eSIM. In my first of 2 interviews with Iman Vellani, she explained how the original inscription that they planned for that bangle was meant to tie into Kang the Conqueror, as well as Kamala's time travel and the original plan for the 5th Avengers film. Do you think it's possible? And this is just nerd speculation, if you can't speculate on it without bringing in what you already know, do you think Kang or He Who Remains might have planned specifically for Kamala to go back in time?
Yeah. Okay, so the inscription on the bangle used to be, what is destined for you will come for you. We did change it after that, but I like to use that as a way of, justifying how Kamala goes back in time and why that was meant to happen, because there were so many questions, and we really wanted to bring partition in the story and just, I know it's cramming a lot in episodes 4 and 5, but we didn't know if we were going to have season 2, and we had to put all our cards on the table and just show everything about this culture and the history of it. And so that line, what is destined for you will come for you, that used to be on the bangle, is kind of a good sense of, this was meant to happen, predestination, even if it kind of hurts the endgame time travel rules, but so does old Steve Rogers. So
exactly. You know how it works.
So yeah. Kevin Feige is the Kang of this universe. That's how I like to.
But that Rumi inscription was added by Kamala's great-grandmother, Aisha, who was a being called a clandestine who came from the Nord dimension, who met Kamala's great-grandfather Hassan and wove this beautiful passage about the destined hopes and dreams of our lives, equally as awaiting of us as we are of them, into the cosmic mythology of this item. And Yusuf having this book on his desk makes me now wonder, is he trying to research that quote on his daughter's bangle? Is he trying to figure out the origin of the quantum band and how this relic made its way through the female lineage of the family he married into? I hope so. That's what I'm assuming he's reading into that book for. Yusuf asks Matt why he's not wearing green, warning a leprechaun might pinch him. Yusuf himself, we know, loves wearing the color green in his clothing, as we saw with his Hulk green body paint in the Ms Marvel series. Yusuf's phone buzzes with a text from Kamala, and I think from that, she's already made a cameo in the series. From this alone. He says that she's in California visiting friends, La La Land as they say. I assume she's meeting Bruno Corelli, who ended the Ms Marvel series planning to go to Caltech, which is in Pasadena, which is on the east side of the LA area. Maybe this is setting up Kamala for a cameo on the Wonder Man series, which will be set in LA. Or, since Bruno was the one to identify that Kamala had the mutant gene, maybe she's visiting him in Pasadena with some follow-up questions on the matter. When Yusuf offers the candy, he runs his hands over the bowl so Matt would know where it is. It's very thoughtful, though Matt can hear the out of those butterscotch's heartbeats. They bring up Kamala and talk about Jersey City's own hometown superhero, Ms Marvel, which Matt takes a passing interest in. He later says that his firm represents fathers and sons and daughters. Yeah, Matt and Kamala are totally gonna meet up by the end of the series. Nexus Point News this week actually reported that following rumors that Marvel is moving forward with a Champion/Young Avengers series, that writer Rachna Freshbaum will be the head writer of that series. Outside, 5 members of the Irish gang of the 5 families pull up, led by Devlin. Remember him, he was the Irish guy who shot Victor's drivers in Red Hook. He tells his guys this:
20 minutes of courage, lads. Then we got 1.8 mil and that fat bastard's off Luca's back.
So Luca was the tracksuit leader of a different faction of the 5 families, and it sounds like Devlin is siding with Luca against Victor's faction. Devlin passes out multicolored masks like this one that was sent to us through some kind of viral marketing packages we've been getting from Marvel Studios. Very fun. There is a red mask, a green one, yellow, blue, and purple. And yes, those are 5 out of the 6 colors of the Infinity Stones, and it sets up them to be looking for an orange thing, which I admit is kind of a stretch of a way to look at this heist. But with 5 members of this gang, color-coded members of this gang, it does set us up to at least look for a 6th, because there are always 6 in a heist. 6 in the heist in Inception, and heists that we've seen in like Heat. Reservoir Dogs, there were 6 of them in that. And actually Reservoir Dogs and the movie was based on the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 were color-coded heists. And the reason there's 6 is that there's always one 2-step stay behind as a getaway driver. And you'll notice all 5 of them leave that car. There's no driver staying behind. And while at first it seems like this is poor planning, it's clear that Devlin doesn't plan on actually getting away. 20 minutes is way too long to spend in a bank that you're robbing, like the Spike Lee movie Inside Man, which gets referenced in this episode, at least cited in the episode's credits. This heist has something else afoot. Now, when the lights go out, Selene performatively raises her smartphone, blaming AT&T for the bad signal, but she's clearly just playing along. We see that Devlin, the team leader, chooses the green mask because he wants the Irish honor, while the goons hit the guard and the hero grabs a gun and a teller. Green politely tells Selene to walk past.
Over here, please. Thank you.
Because she's secretly a 6th member of this gang. But if they really wanted to sell it, he should have at least cussed the way he did at everyone else. Now, based on the mural you can see on the back wall of this bank, they filmed this at 20 Exchange Place in New York City. The mural shows the different stages of New York's financial district in the process of being constructed. Actually, if you look closely, you can hear these workers singing, "We built this city."
Is that it? Is that your best?
Matt pretends to wander in and allows himself to be taken hostage. He listens to the heartbeats of the other hostages. And listen closely here. Aha! When he gets to Selene, notice the heartbeat slows way down because she's not at all stressed out. She is part of the plan. And I think it's this moment when he knows that she's on the inside of whatever's happening here. Matt tells Devlin that if they kill anyone, their armed robbery charge will become a murder, which means 25 to life. And Devlin, from that, knows to call him a solicitor, which is a term for attorney or lawyer in the UK and in Ireland. Matt has to willingly take the hit from the butt of the shotgun, even though he could have totally blocked or evaded it because he can't give himself away as a badass fighter. And the cops pull up and Devlin tells Red,
Nothing changes. They do them. We do us.
Matt also overhears Devlin telling Red to plan to send Blue down with Yusuf to the vault, but as just the assistant manager, Yusuf cannot open that vault. Detective Angie Kim comes back, taking command of the scene. We saw her in episode 1 sharing a drink with Detective Cherry at his retirement party. She gets Devlin on the phone and they agree on the pseudonym Jesse James, referring to the old West bank robber who was killed by the coward Robert Ford. Devlin agrees to letting 2 hostages free.
Let them think they're in control, just like the boss says.
I assume by boss they're referring to Vanessa, and if so, that sheds some light on the way she's actually playing Fisk. Devlin picks Matt and the newlywed wife to go free, but Matt asks to keep him and let the woman's husband go free. Matt overhears Santini talking about how there's nothing in the vault except safety deposit boxes, including his grandmother's ring, and a 1994 Mark Messier signed puck. These hockey pucks go for around $170 on eBay, so, you don't need to put that in a safety deposit box, but I guess it's of sentimental value to Santini. I love this guy. Naturally, Selene suggests diamonds are what they're after because, yeah, she knows the target loot. A good reason to watch Spike Lee's Inside Man. It's also safety deposit boxes that the thieves are targeting, but without spoiling that movie, it's something interesting for a very different reason. Yusuf tells Mr. Blue that the bank was built in 1931, with the vault constructed first and the bank built around it. Actually, 20 Exchange Place was also completed in the year 1931. As Matt has Mr. Red take him to the bathroom, he loosens his tie, collapses his cane, and the Daredevil theme music kicks in until all the music just goes silent as he turns on Mr. Red to attack. The effectiveness of the sound mixing here is on full display because Matt has to muffle the louder sounds to avoid alerting the others. He places his foot on the gun, he uses his necktie to strangle and muzzle Mr. Red, but when that shotgun teeters over the edge, he has to drag the guy down a few steps so that he can catch it at the last second. Matt unmasks him and now has his own red mask. So in effect, he has a way to Daredevil bound and don his natural color while saving the day. Yusuf tries to stall again, saying they change a combination on the first Tuesday of every month, which is kind of a silly trick to try to pull on St. Patrick's Day, which everyone knows is March 17th. Matt picks up the radio to fake an Irish accent to Devlin.
I needed the bank manager to be sufficiently motivated to open the vault. He is now. We're almost in.
Charlie Cox was born in London, but the first role I saw him in was in Boardwalk Empire, where he did one hell of an Irish accent. It's really just fun to see him do different voices, of course. But to avoid coming back empty-handed, Matt, whom Yusuf Khan assumes is just a blind lawyer, picks a 4-tumbler combination lock vault door. Remember, Matt also opened a safe this way in Daredevil Season 2, Episode 6, No Regrets, when he and Elektra stole a Roxxon ledger. Matt says they have to let them think they're in control, which is what he heard Red and Devlin say earlier. And I think Matt distracts Yusuf by having him continue to talk about giving a piggy bank to Kamala to teach her a lesson about saving. And Yusuf says,
"We just try to impart what we know to the next generation. Protect them from what they can't see."
if this Champions series is happening, Matt is totally gonna be the mentor figure of it. Yusuf says,
"Exactly what kind of a lawyer are you?"
A really good one.
In Spider-Man No Way Home, when Matt caught the brick, he said a similar thing.
How did you just do that?
I'm a really good lawyer.
Devlin tells Detective Kim that she doesn't recognize the significance of St. Paddy's Day for a Protestant. Earlier, she said that he was from Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland, the Protestant part of the island and technically part of the United Kingdom. Interesting that she would know that without knowing anything about who is actually robbing this bank other than their accent. But she has a pretty good Irish accent on her own, so maybe she just has a good ear for Catholic Irish versus Belfast Irish. But yes, St. Patrick's Day was made an official Christian holiday back in the 17th century and is widely considered a Catholic holiday. But in the late 1960s, Northern Ireland didn't celebrate the day, and in 1976, Irish Unionist loyalists, those are the pro-UK Protestant minority on the island at the time, concentrated in the north around Belfast, set off a car bomb outside of a St. Patrick's Day celebration. So while today a lot of Protestant Irish do celebrate St. Patrick's Day, I mean, we all celebrate it, it does just have a troubled history because of these sectarian divisions. Devlin makes Kim tell him a joke, and she whips up an absolute heater about a leprechaun nun and a penguin. And I love this because this is the St. Patrick's Day episode and we just need all aspects of being Irish, which just includes some dirty jokes. Meanwhile, Matt reassures Yusuf as he opens the safety deposit boxes.
You're gonna see your daughter again.
Inshallah.
So inshallah is a term meaning if Allah wills it. And on him saying that, box 407 opens and inside is a jewelry pouch with truly an Infinity Stone sized orange diamond. Look, I know those stones were atomized by Thanos, but this sucker looks like the one Thanos woke up with after he did to Gamora what Matt did to Bullseye. In this scene, Matt also talks about his mother.
I never knew my mother until much later in life.
I'm sorry.
Of course, that's a reference to Sister Maggie, Matthew's mother, a nun whom we meet in season 3 of the Daredevil series. Wherever that nun is, I hope she's okay. Devlin did say the score would be 1.8 million, and this diamond looks like it's at least 16 carats, which can run you between 1 and 3 million, depending on the other C's, you know, cut, color, clarity. So that tracks. Knowing the other cops were preparing to raid, Matt takes his time with Devlin and stalls long enough for the smoke grenade to smash in so that he can take advantage of the chaos. He throws the jewelry pouch for Devlin to catch. Mr. Yellow fires at the cops and then bumps into this female bank teller, knocking her on the floor. This is the same poor woman whose face got smashed into the counter earlier and spent the whole episode with a cut on her face. So she just can't take a break, and I assume they cast a stunt woman for this part. Devlin changes into a cop uniform, slipping out among the cops and the hostages, just like the people running the heist in Inside Man do, while Matt thwacks Mr. Yellow's head against a column and he listens through the chaos. Did it kind of sound like there was a daddy in there? Almost like it was Kamala Khan's voice all the way from Pasadena calling to her dad? Or could this been the voice of Frank Castle's son, whom Frank Castle said he would always hear him saying, "Get him, daddy!" Matt hears Devlin handing off the jewelry pouch to Selene to give to Luca, so it's not really clear if the boss they were referring to was, you know, the tracksuit Luca or Vanessa, or if they actually do respect Fisk. Yusuf later speculates that their boss was the contact inside the bank, suggesting it to be Selene, but the way Devlin instructs her to take the diamond to Luca tells me that he doesn't consider her to be his boss, but rather he's serving someone who's just off-site outside of this heist. But the question is, whose box 407 key did they steal? Like, who had this diamond to begin with, and how do they know it was in there? Matt follows Devlin and puts on the red mask, the closest thing he can get to being a true Daredevil right now, and he gives Devlin a bit of Devlin. Devlin puts up a solid fight, but Matt flips off of his back and then smashes his face against some loose bottles, and then does a leaping kick to break Devlin's leg in a fold that I never want to see again. Selene opens a pouch to realize it's one of Yusuf's butterscotches. It reminds me of when Peter Quill fools Yondu by filling the orb with a troll doll. Matt meets with Yusuf the next day and they make some tentative plans for a family dinner at the Khan residence in Jersey City. After eating with the Hulk family and She-Hulk, Matt just loves dining with superhero families. And as a Marvel hero with contacts in the LA area, he could also just be helpful in anything Kamala could be doing down there in SoCal. Jessica has a great video coming out tomorrow that explores Kamala Khan's future on a Champions Young Avengers series, or maybe even Bruno tinkering around in OB's old Caltech Pasadena area aerospace lab that we saw in Loki season 2 with all that temporal technology that might be able to answer some of Kamala's questions about time travel. Matt takes a butterscotch candy this time to draw Yusuf's attention to the bowl, which is where he has placed the missing diamond. Now, a note about the timeline in this episode: this would be taking place on March 17th, 2027. Jessica recently broke down the kind of confusing timeline of the series and how it connects to the events of Daredevil season 3. Dario Scardapani said that this series is set 7 years later. So So if Daredevil Season 3 was in early 2018, 7 years after that would set the Foggy Death prologue in fall 2025 perhaps, and then 1 year after that would be Fisk's election in fall 2026, which then would lead to New Year's 2027, and now we would be in March 2027, 1 month before the events of Captain America Brave New World, which was in April 2027. Also, the driver that Devlin killed in Red Hook in the past episode, a set photo of Frank Castle from episode 4 includes an angle of one of his photos on the wall that looks like it's a photo of that shot driver. So I don't know if they just reused the photo from a different scene for this set dressing, or if Frank Castle might have considered that driver a target of his own that Devlin just conveniently killed off for him. Okay, on to episode 6, titled Excessive Force. This episode opens with a BB report where the production date looks like April 9th, 2024. Now again, for these shots, they used the production clapboards that were just used during the show's reshoot period, which was in April 2024. So this date is not meant to be the in-universe date of this episode, but we can assume that we are now sometime closer to April 2027. So while everything in this show is going on, President Thaddeus Ross is putting together a peace deal with Japan, France, and India over the sharing of adamantium mined on Celestial Island. And boy, I hope it all goes well. Street artists say artists like them get a bad rap, but there are other real people out there trying to hurt the city, and they just have to count on vigilantes to stop them. He doesn't really realize that the city's most prolific street artist at this moment is Muse, and yeah, he's also very much hurting people. Another interviewee shows us a video recorded on his phone.
Like, where do you learn that? Kind of looks like a swordsman. Swordsman, if you're watching this, keep doing the good work because our cops here, they don't really do much. So.
This is Jack Duquesne, played by Tony Dalton, aka the Marvel character Swordsman, last seen in the Hawkeye series, and he appears in unmasked form later in this episode. Here, he's beating up some guys. So a recap on Jack Duquesne. In the Marvel comics, Swordsman is a villain to the Avengers, an expert with swords and knives, very sharp weapons, who came up as a circus performer with a backstory involved with Clint Barton Hawkeye, but against the Avengers, he wielded a McLuhan sword, the same alien substance of the 10 Rings of the Mandarin. But Swordsman would later join the Avengers and spend some time as part of the West Coast Avengers lineup. Swordsman is also known for a pretty wild Kang storyline where his corpse gets resurrected in order to marry Mantis when she was the destined celestial Madonna. In the 2021 Hawkeye series, Jack Duquesne was engaged to Kate Bishop's mother, Eleanor Bishop. Jack came from the super wealthy Duquesne family, including his elderly uncle Armand III and his young relative Armand VII, whom he had a bit of a inter-family rivalry with, and liked to remind him that he wet his pants at the Hamptons one time. Like Kate Bishop, Jack is also an expert fencer and a sword enthusiast, and with Armand III, he bids on Hawkeye's Ronin sword, which was taken from the Avengers compound after Avengers Endgame. The auction, though, is bombed by the tracksuit gang, killing Uncle Armand. As Kate and Clint investigate Jack's interest in Clint's sword, Jack gets briefly framed for Uncle Armand's killing until Kate and Clint realize that it was actually Kate's mother, Eleanor, and her boss, Wilson Fisk, that were the big bads behind it all. Eleanor goes away, Jack's exonerated, and he ends up helping Kate and Clint in the fight at 30 Rockefeller Center against the tracksuit gang. So by the end of that series, Jack was just kind of an aloof, rich sword fighter with family drama and an interest in Avengers weaponry. But we did get this moment where Jack meets Clint's new LARPer friend, Conrad.
Have you ever heard of LARPing?
LARPing? Is that some sort of leisure activity?
Well, I'm in this guild, and
now I'm wondering if that moment was meant to set up why Jack Duquesne now shows up in this video, masked, sword fighting with these thugs that first I thought might actually be a LARPing session, but no, these guys have real baseball bats and are going at him. This is a real fight. It looks like Jack has just learned the same lesson Clint Barton did from the LARPers on that show, that it's totally fine to dress up in a silly costume if you're putting your deadly talents to positive use. A subway train passes a construction worker, and we linger on this guy for a while. At first, I thought this might be Muse in disguise, but if you look closely, this guy's black. So this is either a city worker on strike after Fisk's union busting, or maybe I'm just overthinking this shot because I'm like, God, he's super close to these cars. And then in a Law and Order style cold open, another city worker finds the body of that Muse victim that we saw being drained of blood at the end of episode 4. His eyes are cut out in what looks like a diamond pattern, which Muse apparently does to all of his victims, and this was reflected in his artwork showing gouged out, screaming people in his terrifying lair. So why does Muse do this to their eyes? Well, Muse does this to Blind Spot in the Charles Soule Daredevil comic storyline that Muse comes from. You could look at this as part of just a serial killer modus operandi, like in the Hannibal prequel film Red Dragon, the Tooth Fairy killer, played by Ralph Fiennes, would implant shards of mirror glass into his victim's eyes to reflect back his own transformation into the dragon. But obviously, this being a series about a blind vigilante with themes about justice being blind, and Muse, aka Bastion, taking an intellectual curiosity in Heather Glenn's writings about masked vigilantes and himself wearing a mask that makes it look like his own eyes have been gouged out, I just feel like he might admire figures like Daredevil, and hey, maybe he even knows that the Daredevil vigilante is a blind man. If our theories are right that Muse has been a night stalker watching the bloodbath of Matt's actions from the shadows, he at least seems to be pretty inspired by the Punisher, and he would only have seen the Punisher do his shit if he was watching a lot of what has been happening. Now, the city sanitation worker from the bank heist in episode 5, Johnny Santini, returns now to pressure wash what has so far been the largest mural from Muse yet, a giant Wall Street bull inlaid with a dollar bill. The dollar bill also inlaid on Kingpin's crown, and I love how he used the floral spiral that's on every dollar bill to form the bull's eye. Ha! Bullseye! And the words kiss and ass on either side with the S's as dollar signs. On top of Kingpin's crown, the printed word king, and Fisk is now depicted with a giant belly and a tiny head like he often is in the comics in an animation, kissing the bull's booty hole while holding some romantic flowers behind his back. And as before, Muse autographed it in the lower right corner. So the artistic statement here is not at all subtle. Mayor Fisk, I suppose, is being called a kiss ass to the financial brokers on Wall Street, I suppose connected to his selling out of the unionized city workers for disruptive big tech outsiders funded by Wall Street investors, and all the money grubbing he does at his fundraiser in this episode. And it's just ironic that these city workers now have to be the ones to scrub this mess up. I'm just now wondering why Muse cares so much about the economic debate of it all. Like, while Banksy has been known for pretty pointed political satire, I'm just waiting to see how these types of political statements reconcile with the gory serial killer who stalks the abandoned Track 61. Like, I get what's going on with Bastion being super violent and painting with blood, I just don't know why he's so interested in Kingpin as a political figure and the imagery of the $1 bill. Matt holds Foggy's funeral card and recites the Litany of St. Ives, which is a Catholic liturgical prayer asking for mercy and humanity. O God, from whom cometh all that is right and just, thou didst establish St. Ives as a judge in the midst of his brethren, making him the friend and advocate of the poor. Do thou make us by his intercession steadfast in the pursuit of justice and confident in thy merciful goodness through Christ our Lord. Amen. Now, St. Ives is a patron saint of solicitors, jurists, and barristers. So this is also a phrase Matt, as a devout Catholic lawyer, has probably spoken before. Matt replays in his mind the events of the first half of the season, first dwelling on the calm moments before the violence kicked in, and then a highlight reel of every time Matt has unleashed the devil this season. But it all culminates with Karen crying over Foggy's corpse, so Matt is concluding that it was his own violent tendencies that brought the violence of Foggy's death. Now, yes, I know there are still some true believers out there who believe that Foggy faked his death, especially after the official Daredevil account in the past week on Instagram posted a page from the Secret Life of Foggy Nelson comic storyline in which Foggy fakes his death and goes into witness protection. I just want those of you who believe that to know that I see you, and part of me hopes that you're right, but bigger part of me just hopes that Foggy only comes back in season 2 as like a mental projection of Matt's conscience. Sheila walks Mayor Fisk through his schedule, a visit to Bowery Mission, which is a real mission in New York City that helps people experiencing homelessness, and a children's art fund benefit. Better keep that funded, Mr. Mayor, because cutting school art classes is how we get people like Muse. Also, Lord, I hope those kids are singing some Starship. Tracksuit Luca waits for Mayor Fisk in his office. This is one of the 5 family leaders whom Devlin was talking about in episode 5, but I will admit the exact factions of the conflict among the 5 families just seems a bit unclear in these episodes. Also, while Luca wears this decorative tracksuit and was called out for wearing a tracksuit, it is a different kind of tracksuit from the Tracksuit Mafia and Hawkeye, and I just don't think he was written to be that affiliated with that particular group. Luca mocks Fisk's book collection while we intercut to Matt and Heather talking about her book publishing and her next title and how she's really shifting to focus on masked vigilantes, and she reminds Matt that he has represented a few vigilantes. That refers to Frank Castle and probably whoever that kid under the Spider-Man mask was. And I like how Matt fully calls him by his Punisher moniker in this moment. Fisk tells Luca that he needs to pay Victor the 1.8 mil that he owes, and Luca says, shove it! And Fisk's face twitches, showing that the only thing stopping him from beating this guy senseless is just the room that they're in, and Fisk ups it to 2.8 mil, pinning his New York Big Apple pin on the tracksuit. Meanwhile, Heather ponders,
does a mask allow us to be our true selves, or does it strip away our identity and allow us to act like animals?
The intercutting to Fisk reflects how the Mayor Fisk identity is really the mask worn by the true identity of Kingpin. After the credits, we see another Kingpin mural by Muse, which is the same one we saw on a smaller scale in past episodes, but now I guess it's been recreated on a much larger scale. If human blood is being used for all of these, that's just a lot of bodies Muse has piled up. Like, I would say you'd need more than 60 for that. Sanitation worker and our favorite Rangers fan, Johnny Santini, who shows back up to beat around the bush before confirming the murals are made out of blood.
It's blood. the murals made out of human blood.
I just would have liked a bit more context on how Muse rendered the giant $1 bill art. Like maybe they could have gone around asking print shops and FedEx Kinkos if anyone's been printing any big jobs lately, or asking any of the locals if they saw anyone spending what must have been several hours making murals this large. But I guess the point of the show is that the cops in this world just kind of suck. Angela Del Toro skipped school to visit Matt and to report that Uncle Hector was onto something about all the missing persons cases and abductions in the Heights, from Matt taking an interest in Yusuf's daughter Kamala to now adopting a cool teach approach to Angela. Matt is definitely in a position to mentor these young champions. Matt also tells Angela that he kind of hates therapy talk, which is kind of an interesting dig at his conversation he had this morning with Heather, who was prying at the psychology of mass vigilantes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, interesting.
We see a new Muse mural, Upward Mobility, with the city skyline and the Statue of Liberty holding an assault rifle, and then the skyline turned into a graph line that I suppose is meant to be a stock market index on the increase. The political messaging is all over the place on this one. It kind of feels like a Mr. Brainwash derivative of an actual Cutting Banksy piece. Like, is the commentary here gentrification? Is it over-militarized police forces? Is it intolerance to immigrants? You can make a case for any of it. So now I'm just kind of wondering if the messaging confusion is part of Muse's strategy to oversaturate the public with inconsistent and very broad political commentary so that police are just kind of looking in all the wrong places for him. Commissioner Gallo and, sure, why not, Detective Angie Kim meet with Mayor Fisk to run through the several dozen of Muse's confirmed works and the potentially 60 victims or more whose blood was used. Now, for reference in our world, David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, killed 6 people in New York in the 70s. Killer Joel Rifkin killed 17 women in the 80s, and the most prolific is believed to be Samuel Little, who killed a confirmed 93 people. There was also, though, H.H. Holmes, who confessed to 27 murders, but is believed to have killed as many as 133 or maybe even 200. And H.H. Holmes does exist in the MCU because we saw an advertisement for his murder castle in Loki Season 2, Episode 3 at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893.
Edison, H.H. Holmes. Yes, hot air balloons.
And we cannot forget the MCU serial killer of Thor's adopted brother Loki, who killed at least 80 people in a short amount of time in New York in 2012. That man is a murderer. So for Muse to get away with this high body count in the modern age is pretty wild, because when we saw Matt walking around to find Frank Castle, there are CCTV cameras everywhere in New York these days. There are witnesses everywhere. There's all kinds of crime scene analytics CSI crews can do now. That's why you don't see huge body counts of serial killers being successful in the modern times. But you know, this is also a very disorganized post-blip MCU. And again, the cops in the show are no good. Mayor Fisk disassociates from the pressure of this moment, the voices silencing to the sound of a ticking clock, and then just laughs madly and orders not to sound the alarm for now. It's a victorious laugh because he knows that he's going to use this to assemble his anti-vigilante task force. Meanwhile, these 2 poor girls take a break from clubbing to try to meet Muse while he's in the middle of some blood smearing. Now we can hear him spray painting here. So either he's using spray paint cans to augment his blood paint, or he just loads that blood paint into the spray paint cans. Either way, it's pretty crazy. This moment is actually an exact recreation of a comic moment from the Charles Soule run when Muse is painting a mural of Punisher captioned, "You love me, you love what I do," and 2 ladies want to take a selfie with him. Fisk fastens his cufflinks. We know how important the cufflinks are to him from the Netflix era. The original cufflinks he got were inherited from his father. Actually, when he and Vanessa used to be closer, she picked out which cufflinks to wear. We see Fisk's fundraiser, an evening with Mayor Fisk, as Vanessa counsels Fisk on her experience as an art dealer, convincing rich snobs to buy pieces with what are essentially artificial inflated values. She says it's like selling a Basquiat to a billionaire. One of Basquiat's paintings, United 1982, sold for $110.5 million in 2017. That's Robert Downey Jr.'s Dr. Doom money. To Vanessa, this is all a game of playing to these billionaires' egos, making them feel important and needed. Among these wealthy elites is a woman credited as Artemis Sledge, and she's played by Katharina Lanassa, who currently stars on Brandon's favorite show, The Pit. The diamonds she's rocking as earrings, assuming these are diamonds, look to be roughly as big as the orange one in the safety deposit box in episode 5. So maybe it was her diamond. Jack Duquesne just shows up at this event. The Duquesne family would certainly be wealthy enough to get a ticket for this, and he holds Fisk to task for his anti-vigilante posturing, showing he's enjoying his street fighting as the swordsman. God, I just want this guy to meet Mantis so bad and see if there's any chemistry. Just imagine Tony Dalton saying Madonna. Jack warns Fisk that if he pisses off the people in in this room, one phone call and it's bye-bye Gracie Mansion, referring to the mayor's office. Obviously, Jack is speaking for himself and his own pursuits as swordsman, but we should also note that many of the superheroes we have seen in the MCU have been backed or at least supported by extreme wealth. Tony Stark was a billionaire, and his Stark Industries Foundation is essentially a private fund supporting the academic efforts of people like Peter Parker and Riri Williams. Stephen Strange was extremely wealthy, though he did spend most of his money seeking a cure for his hands, but he still lives in a pretty nice place on Bleecker Street. The Pim Van Dyne Foundation is going to a lot of fancy events, pulling in a ton of cash, and can at least afford to live in one of the most expensive parts of San Francisco. T'Challa and Shuri, Wakandan royalty. Shang-Chi started as a valet in San Francisco, but I assume now he's in a much better financial situation, having reconnected with Wenwu. Now, we did see Sam Wilson struggling financially in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and yeah, a lot of superheroes do live at least off the grid in exile, not exactly lavish lifestyles, but I just think there's an argument in this universe that billionaires would prefer power concentrated with independent superheroes and vigilantes that they would have the opportunity to buy off or manipulate. And it's just because these billionaires would oppose letting power be concentrated in these political positions and public government offices that would be tied up more in red tape and regulation and, you know, the will of those 99% of the voters. While Wilson Fisk started the season slimmed down, complimented by Mattis having a lighter step and eating an egg white omelet with one asparagus, now this big boy tears his first suit that Vanessa puts on because he's been indulging in that carb-heavy cheat day and physically transforming back into the oversized villainous Kingpin. Fisk gets pulled from the fundraiser to look at Muse's latest work, a Statue of Liberty, again, but now with Muse's own bleeding eyes, holding an open pair of handcuffs, and the bodies of those two girls laying at the bottom, eyes gouged out as their souls are painted in their blood, hovering over their bodies. The city of New York is now behind on the left, reflected in the blood epoxy paint substance below. Along the top is written Selfie, which could be Muse's own commentary. These girls asking him for a selfie, but the space between the self and the why could be his existentialist statement of like, self, why? I don't know. But back at Fisk's office, all Mayor Fisk can talk about is the handcuffs of this, which he just takes as a mockery of the police. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in that mural, but Fisk just laser focuses on the handcuffs and uses that as a predicate to assemble a task force and gives Gallo a stack of NYPD personnel files. On the top is Connor Powell, of course, the cop who was involved in the Hector Ayala case. On his file, you can see under scars and tattoos, thin blue line symbol, and then another entry that I couldn't read, but I assume refers to the Punisher skull wrist tattoo. So the thin blue line symbol is the pro law enforcement symbol that started as a way of saying like cops are the thin blue line between order and chaos, which was then incorporated into the Blue Lives Matter movement as a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter. Powell's skull tattoo did have a flag on the head, but there was no blue in that tattoo, so I think he has an additional tattoo with a thin blue line. The next page is Cole North. Cole North in the comics is a cop with no love for vigilantes who is tasked to apprehend Daredevil. This character also came out of the Charles Soule storyline that had Muse in it. We'll meet him in a bit, but we see here under his tattoo line, Punisher symbol tattoo. So it's clear that Fisk, and I guess Buck Cashman and Daniel Blake, pulled all NYPD records of cops listed as having a Punisher tattoo or something similar somewhere on their bodies. Then next is Jared L. Polin. Under his tattoo section is American flag wrapped around something, and then Punisher logo. Remember, after telling Commissioner Gallo no overtime for cops earlier this season, Mayor Fisk now says this task force will have special privileges like overtime pay and no body cameras. Yo. We cut to Fisk meeting with his task force in a warehouse with these tattered white plastic blinds that kind of look like the teeth of the Punisher logo. One cop has his arm raised to show that he has the same Punisher wrist tattoo that Powell had. Polin, wearing a green shirt, walks up with the tattoo in the back of his hand, and at the center of this room is Powell chatting with Cole North.
Others, you've been a little overzealous. But all of you throughout your careers have shown initiative.
Aha! Cole North looking down on the word overzealous, I think is a dead giveaway that this is the cop who killed Hector Ayala. The hoodie he wears under his jacket looks a lot like what the shooter was wearing at the end of episode 3. Cole North says that he spotted a dealer giving an 11-year-old oxy one time, and he implied he used some pretty excessive force with the guy and was reprimanded for doing that. Buck and Fisk distribute new body armor and calls this group the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, already reaching by lumping in Muse, a violent serial killer, with just vigilantes who take law into their own hands. Like, those are not apples to apples, but Fisk is getting away with it. Angela Del Toro goes down into the abandoned train line that she brought up before, following some lead on the missing persons cases. We see graffiti of a Punisher logo and another image of a face in blue that looks like it might be Fisk, but blinded. A few seconds later, there's another blue outline with the Punisher logo on the chest, and behind that, a screaming figure with a crown. So I think we're seeing Muse's early doodles and like the drawings he was trying out before before he started working in blood. And based on this, I'm wondering if he really was inspired by the Punisher in particular. Matt, meanwhile, researches Track 61. Now on Matt's computer screen, we can read the subway line's history and some references to some past MCU history. Here's what it says. Track 61 and Track 63 at Grand Central Terminal, originally built to carry freight and serve as loading platforms for a steam powerhouse that once existed on 49th Street. The powerhouse was in the central station and reached the immediate area for quick access and delivery. In 2012, parts of the terminal were destroyed by the fallout of the Chitauri invasion. The New York City Municipal Cleanup Team led an 8-month-long project in order to restore the terminal's foundation. Multiple lives were lost in the effort due to weak support on the inner walls. Others claim Track 61 was part of a clandestine network used by spies during World War II. While these tales add to the allure, the true history of Track 61 is rooted in its role as a sanctuary for the powerful and influential. Today, Track 61 stands as a monument to New York's hidden history. So, with Chitauri invasion, this is not only a reference to the Avengers Battle of New York in 2012, but also the cleanup operation afterward led by groups like Adrian Toome's crew that we saw in the prologue of Spider-Man Homecoming, but also everything Fisk was doing with Madame Gao and Owsley in the aftermath of the Battle of New York with Union Allied, and everything probably the Hand was doing to dig that big pit under Midland Circle, and also the reference to the World War II era tunnels, maybe connected to the ones that we saw in Captain America: The First Avenger. So after Soledad's call, Matt initially calls 911, but then says, it, and tosses the broken Daredevil horn on Foggy's funeral program. Matt suits up in his rooftop shed, and we see a wide shot of his rooftop sprint that looks a little CGI, but whatever. Matt's back in the suit, and I'm happy. Now, it is a little odd that we don't actually see Muse nab Angela. Like, there was a moment for that to be very scary, but we just didn't see it. And when we see him later carrying her past the passing train and then into his lair, notice that her head is covered by her hair or her hoodie, so I'm just assuming that they didn't use the actress for these shots. Now, here we see more of Muse's lair, and we hear flies buzzing around the hanging bodies. Now, the bodies hanging from the hooks was from Muse's comic appearance, though there I believe he was keeping those bodies alive to continually drain them. As Muse pulls up Angela's sleeve to find her vein, we see she's wearing, though, red, white, and blue beads that were part of the necklace that held Uncle Hector's tiger amulet. So maybe she has the amulet on her? I feel like if she did, she would kick Muse's ass right now. Fisk, meanwhile, goes down to where he's keeping Adam, bringing an axe. Fisk talks about when he was younger, he'd fight men 3 to 4 times his size using tools to bring them down, of course referring to the tool of the hammer that he used to kill his dad. And he says this:
Men who knew how to use their hands, they did so often. And I learned that a simple tool, it can be a great equalizer.
Remember, Vanessa had told Heather that what first attracted Adam to her was how he used his hands as an artist. So Fisk must have been jealous as someone who only uses his hands to hit things. Now he gives his artist a tool. Meanwhile, Muse looks out of his doorway at a passing subway train, and I love how the red taillights of the train reflect in his eyes, giving them a red glow, but that redness also blinds him to the red of Daredevil charging at him. Matt whips his cable at Muse to distract him as he lunges at him with a punch. I love the final act of this episode, the way it features both Daredevil and Kingpin in parallel brutal hand-to-hand brawls with their artist targets. 2 men who are doing very different things with their art, but both of these men, from the eyes of the people beating them down, have chosen specific female subjects that these men care about. Matt gets this incredible flip kick on Muse, and then Matt straightens up and he hears a heartbeat. Yeah, it kind of sounds like he's hearing just one heartbeat for Muse, and Angela's heartbeat is too faded, and then we match cut to Adam's more frantic heartbeat before his fight with Fisk. Meanwhile, Muse rallies with a knife and slashes at Matt, and then pulls off some impressive fight choreography, including some spin kicks. What can't Muse do? Now, the stuntman they used for Muse seems to be much sturdier than how Bastion appeared in episode 2. Adam swings his axe at Fisk, and Fisk headbutts him as we match cut on Matt headbutting Muse. Matt removes the syringe pump from Angela, and we cut back to Muse as the camera rolls with him off the ground. Muse attacks Matt, and Matt uses his club's cable to zip the syringe against the wall, breaking it, and then pulls that hook back to hit Muse in the face. Matt roars and lifts Muse as we match cut to Fisk doing the same thing to Adam, and then both men repeatedly punch the head of their targets. Matt wraps his cable around Muse's neck and then lifts to strangle him as Fisk screams, "Mine!" as he continues to pummel Adam, but then Matt hears the deafening thumps of Angela's heart, and he releases Muse and performs chest compressions as we hear Matt's prayer of the Litany of St. Ives again, as its full meaning as a justification for violence in the pursuit of justice becomes clear. Muse slips away, but as Fisk sits above the corpse of Adam, we hear choir voices singing the John Pisano Daredevil theme, and Angela asks,
Daredevil?
It's okay, I'm here.
So Matt is back to being Daredevil. Meanwhile, Kingpin sits in his cell, realizing what he did, and he looks kind of like how he did in his prison cell at the end of season 1. Both hero and villain of this series were dragged back to their extremes, realizing excessive force was the only path they understand. Their bodies and souls intertwined in the parallel physical attacks and transform back into the Daredevil and Kingpin identities they have been fighting so hard to avoid. One of the best ways you can support us at New Rockstars is to grab some of this Daredevil and Punisher themed merch at nerdriot.shop. This pillow has been the only way I've been getting through this season. I need something to just squeeze and to protect me. Comment down below with your thoughts on this episode and join us tomorrow morning on the Break Room channel for an extended Q&A with all your questions and theories about these 2 episodes. Follow me at Yves Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.